able to take heart. I'm back. Tall Tales airs afternoons at 4 right here on The Point. Ray says set your radio to 93.3 FM and forget it. You needn't touch it again.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Of Cat 4. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Hurricane Michael very close to Category 4 hurricane strength.
Will it get there? We're going to be right on that borderline, but it is going to be a powerful storm either way, likely making landfall. We're looking at a maybe noon to 1 o'clock time frame. Still a little bit of time for this to move a little bit, but think lunchtime, early afternoon is when landfall will begin to really become a reality.
Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz, and this just in from the National Hurricane Center. Michael has, in fact, now just reached Category 4 strength with winds in excess of 131 miles an hour. The eye of the storm should pass near Panama City, but the winds will impact an area from Pensacola through Florida's Big Bend region. Several areas are under mandatory evacuation orders. In others, residents urged to get out in the few hours remaining.
If you're on the fence, don't think about it. Do it. This storm can kill you. Remember, during a storm, first responders, they can't come out in the middle of a storm. They can't come out and save you.
Florida's Governor Rick Scott, the president in Corn Country Tuesday with a rally in Iowa.
President Trump's visit to Council Bluffs comes after he proposed lifting a federal ban on summer sales of high ethanol blends of gasoline. Farmers in Iowa and other states pushing for greater sales of the corn-based fuel.
We are unleashing the power of E15 to fuel our country all year long.
The president also firing up his base to keep Republicans in control of Congress.
In just 4 weeks, you will have the chance to render your verdict on the Democrats' outrageous conduct on November 6th, and you can do early voting.
Early voting in Iowa began Tuesday.
Fox's Steve Rappaport. The president also says he has a short list ready to replace U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley, who announced Tuesday she'll be leaving at the end of the year. The president says he'll announce his decision within a few weeks. This is Fox News.
Hyundai Construction Equipment is sold exclusively on Guam by Morrico Equipment, a market leader with proven reliability in large excavators, loaders, and forklifts. Morrico Equipment, with 28 years on Guam, offers Hyundai Construction Equipment sales, rental, parts, service, and fully maintained lease finance. Hyundai Equipment is in stock on Guam. Equipment demonstrations are available on request. Contact Morrico Equipment on Ipoh Road at 649-1946 or go to morricoequipment.com.
Grilled salmon, petite sirloin. Can't decide.
What are you doing?
Making my top 10 list of favorite dishes at Ruby Tuesday.
You really need to get a hobby.
But I can't decide. There's no way I can narrow down so many classic dishes to just 10.
Then it's a good thing Ruby Tuesday did it for you.
It's the all-time favorites menu at Ruby Tuesday Guam. We took our most popular dishes and put them on one great menu for only $14.99. Hickory pork chop, Parmesan shrimp pasta, prime loco moco. 10 top sellers at one great price. Pick your favorite for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
At the American Music Awards on Tuesday night, a new record. Taylor Swift winning Artist of the Year, Best Pop Rock Album, and Best Tour. That makes 22 career AMA awards for her, breaking the old mark set by Whitney Houston. Taylor Swift says the credit belongs to the fans.
Most of all, though, to the fans, if you didn't want to hang out with us, we wouldn't have been on an amazingly fun stadium tour. So thank you so much for everything. I love you guys.
The American Music Awards broadcast on ABC. The ongoing investigation continues in the deadly weekend limo crash. A New York transportation official says the owner of the limousine was warned not to operate it after it failed an inspection. But the company says the violations were repaired. A Craigslist ad posted last week lists a vehicle for sale by that company matching the description of the one that crashed. The ad says the limo was in excellent condition. It was listed for $9,000. State of Tennessee has denied an inmate's request for the chair rather than lethal injection. Edmund Zagorski, scheduled to be executed Thursday for killing 2 men during a drug deal. The state says it will go forward with its plans to lethally inject him. In baseball, it's wait till next year for the New York Yankees.
The 1-2. Swung on, tapped down to third, slowly hit. Charging is Nunez. He fires to first. Stretch. Got him!
Eduardo Nunez getting Gleyber Torres in time for the ground out to end the game. And after review, the Boston Red Sox win the series, taking the ALDS 3-1 thanks to a 4-3 win over the New York Yankees. Audio courtesy of WEEI. Christian Vasquez would help out on offense, hitting a solo shot in the fourth inning with what would eventually be the game-deciding hit. Now the Red Sox head to the American League Championship Series, which opens up on Saturday at Fenway Park against the reigning world champs, the Houston Astros. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
Dow futures are down slightly a day after the Dow dropped 56 points and the NASDAQ gained 2. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
Oh, it's a Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, back up. My Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked bread. Enjoy yours with mustard and pickles. Get a Big Hot Pastrami at your favorite Subway location. It's so good you won't want to share. For a limited time only. Subway. Make it what you want.
The Bob Klitsky Show is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959. Now you can start planning for the holidays by getting a personal Christmas loan from $1,000 up to $3,500. Family Finance has 3 convenient locations to serve you. Give them a call in Dededo, 633-4473, Hagåtña, 475-4545, and the Upper Tumon location on the 2nd floor of the Pacific Building at 647-5626. Get your Christmas loans today from Family Finance.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
Taste the sizzle at Chili's with our new fajita flavors. Our signature fajitas are served with sliced bell peppers, caramelized onions, topped with chipotle garlic butter, and chopped cilantro. Build your fajita with over 16 ounces of tender grilled chicken, juicy steak, and a dozen pieces of seasoned grilled shrimp in the family fajita trio. All served with warm flour tortillas and fresh toppings like mixed cheese, guacamole, salsa, and pico de gallo. Experience bold, sizzling fajita flavors only at Chili's. More life happens here.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitsky, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitsky.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's one of the things that we stand for right here on Tall Tales. We are constitutionalists here on Tall Tales, even when we don't agree with the interpretation given to the Constitution by the likes of Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia, may he rest in peace. And even though I've been pretty much, I've leveled a lot of scathing criticism at the Supreme Court as an institution for having usurped the purview of the legislative branch of of our government. So the way things are right now, we have a House of Representatives that along with the Senate, enacts laws that, subject to the approval of the president, or enacts bills that, subject to the approval of the president, can become law. And if the president vetoes, there's a possibility of override. But the Supreme Court has gone one better than that. The Supreme Court, although originally conceived as interpreting the laws, has taken upon itself to make the law. And that's not even the end of it. The Supreme Court has also taken it upon itself to amend the Constitution that we think so much of. The best, or a really good example, would be the case called Roe versus Wade that we heard so much about during the Kavanaugh kerfuffle. And I advanced the reason that that there was so much hard-fought battling about Kavanaugh's confirmation is that certainly the left and the right also recognize that that 5 people in black robes, if they take it upon themselves, can amend the Constitution of the United States. And I would advance as an example Roe versus Wade. If you were to get a Word version of the United States Constitution and run a search and replace on that Constitution along with all of the amendments, you won't find the word privacy in there at all, because it's not there. It never was there, and it wasn't a right of privacy. It was not something that the founders found to be that important. But through a series of cases, the politicians in black robes found the right of privacy, and they used the woman's right of privacy as the ratio decidendi for Roe versus Wade. So although the right of privacy is not in the Constitution, in effect, the Supreme Court amended the Constitution so that they could make a ruling based on a non-existent right in that Constitution. So everybody who's engaged in government now understands that, and understands the extreme importance of who sits on that on that Supreme Court, because those people have the ultimate power under our Constitution to make laws and to amend the Constitution. And that's why the Kavanaugh matter became such a knockdown, drag-out brawl that we covered somewhat here on Tall Tales, as is our usual custom. So I read the Second Amendment to the Constitution as a good way of reminding our international radio listening audience, all those folks out there in the 671 area code who could dial Tall Tales with 888-TALK, 888-8255, or by dialing the area code if you happen to be somewhere else in the North American numbering plan, remembering for our international radio listening audience that the country code for Guam is 1. But I start out with the Second Amendment to once again remind our international radio listening audience of some of these, what I think are constitutional truths, and submit my own view that the greatness of our country has depended over the years on some adherence to the principles contained in that Constitution, which we are very rapidly losing a grip on. So I have high hopes that Mr. Justice Brett Kavanaugh is going to get us back on the right track, not the left track, but the right track, to preserve the good government that the founders designed with that Constitution, subsequently amended with the Bill of Rights and some other stuff. So that's how we start the program, and that's why we start the program with the Bill of Rights. I'm having a little trouble getting my Facebook up working here. Let's see, I've got already Ismael Velez cites the Privacy Act. Yeah, welcome back. Ismael Velez cites the Privacy Act of 1974. Yeah, there it is. And Albert Eliasson, unfortunately, that amendment has resulted in millions of dead babies, and that's why I think it's so important that we stick with the Constitution as enacted. I carry no brief for the living Constitution boys, those guys on the left that say, well, you know, it's a living document and it has to change to adopt to modern society, and that's the result right there. Albert Eliasson nailed it. Unfortunately, that amendment, Roe versus Wade, has resulted in millions of dead babies. Joe Cruz, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Is that you, real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
That's another Joe.
That's not the real one.
Not the real Joe Cruz. It's a Joe Cruz.
I'm in here working. Those people are on Facebook. I'm working.
Okay, so this is a Joe Cruz, not the real Joe Cruz. Okay. And Jose Martinez, I don't support beating kids to a pulp, but I support the right to choose to beat your kid to a pulp in the privacy of your own home, right? That's Jose's kind of sarcastic gloss on the word privacy. And privacy is another one. It's one of those magic words. Well, yeah, everyone's entitled to his privacy. But when you start really talking about what it means, it is not something you can nail down that easily. Like, who was it? One of the posters here talked about the Privacy Act of 1974. That's a federal statute, a statute from our national government that prohibits the national government from being too intrusive into your affairs. That's the kind of thing maybe that I could warm up to, but I think that I go along with Albert's comment here more than just about anything else. So that's the reason that we start out with a Second Amendment like that, to remind ourselves of what I think are some actually eternal truths when it comes to something that is temporal, like the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution is, in a sense, based on natural law, as is the Declaration of Independence. And if in that case, the way because we've got some really cockeyed ideas how we do things now, doesn't necessarily mean that the way the Constitution was put together needs to be changed by 9 folks in black robes. So I guess that would be, I would characterize today's read-in as the homily, and I'll go from there to Jemmy Ekotny, which, as you tall tales, yeah, there you go. Jemmy Ekotny, Meet the Press. It's my backwards bilingual play on words, and it means meet the press. And Real Joe Cruz is really quick on the draw today with that Meet the Press theme song. So I'm going to start out with the Daily News. And the Daily News says, Our View, time to convert business privilege tax to sales tax. Immediate past President Bobby Shringy says the Chamber of Commerce opposes ending business tax exemptions or raising business taxes. Sales tax and taxing online purchases are alternatives, he says. It's getting more expensive to live on Guam, as highlighted by the island's latest consumer price index. The index, which is a measure of the average change in prices over time for goods and services, increased by 2.8% over last year, according to BOSAP. For the uninitiated, BOSAP is the acronym for the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, BOSAP. This year, fresh fruit costs 10% more. Eggs are 18.8% higher. It's more expensive to power your home and fuel your vehicle. And gas just went up again yesterday, didn't it? Prices are also higher for cereal, beef, pork, bread, alcohol, cigarettes, and more. Albert Parris, chief economist with BOSAP, and Bobby Shringy, past chairman of the Guam Chamber, said the higher prices are a result of a combination of factors, including the increased business privilege tax and fuel tax. No doubt. This highlights the need for the government to convert, the text here, this highlights the need for the government of Guam to covert, I think they mean convert, the business privilege tax into a sales tax, and for that conversion to begin right away. And the Daily News goes on to explain that with the business privilege tax, the bad feature, or the good feature, depending on where you are, is that it's invisible. You don't realize when you pony up money to buy groceries that 4% of the money that you give the cashier actually winds up going to the government as a business privilege tax. I'm not being super precise here. It's a little bit off from 4%, but I stand to be corrected by the staff at the Election Commission, who are the self-appointed territorial mathematicians, but it's close enough. So when the government increases the business privilege tax, it doesn't jump out and grab you by the eyeballs. A sales tax, on the other hand, is something that's added to the price of what you buy. So if you buy $1 worth of stuff and the sales tax rate is 4%, you're going to have to pay $1.04 for $1 worth of stuff. If you travel in the mainland, it's pretty hard to escape sales taxes. An awful lot of the states have sales taxes. We don't have them here. And the Daily News position is that we should have them here. Daily News says transitioning to a sales tax should begin right away. Start with a 1% sales tax and increase by 1 percentage point a year, while the business privilege tax is reduced by 1 percentage point every year. While GovGuam makes the transition, it can work with bondholders to transition payment guarantees from business privilege tax to a sales tax to avoid violated bond covenants. Well, I'll give the Daily News credit for a logically put together editorial here today. I only have one question. Where were you at the time that we spent so much time things like serial special sessions and increasing and decreasing the GRT and on and on? That would have been a really good time to weigh in on this particular issue. It's kind of late right now. Not a bad argument, but sometimes as far as politics is concerned, the saying is timing is everything. So we go from there to the Post. Wow, it's, you know, with outfits like the Chamorro Land Trust, it's pretty easy to write hard-hitting, no-nonsense editorials, isn't it? Yeah. Here's the Post. Decision to clear DLM director of wrongdoing defies legal opinion. Well, I wouldn't have been quite so polite. I would have said decision to clear DLM director of wrongdoing defies logic. And you'll remember that yesterday we awarded the Ovita Nauta badge to Michael Bora. That award is given to someone who really screws up and winds up being cheered by his or her employer. In Ovita's case, she really screwed up, pled guilty, was indicted for a felony, pled guilty to a misdemeanor. What she did was she stole money from the government, and her employer, Tony Lamarena, said, well, she's really a great employee, and she won the MagPro Award for customer service. And what she did wrong, she didn't do here, she did somewhere else, ignoring the fact that when she was indicted, she could have been fired. And my 2 cents worth is she should have been fired, unless we want to encourage people to steal money from the government of Guam. Anyhow, that's the Ovita Nauta Award, and I nominated Michael Bora for the Ovita Nauta Award. Giving credit where credit is due, Michael couldn't have done it all by himself. Certainly his commission, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, comes in for some of the credit. So I also nominated the chairperson, Pika Fairan, and also Magdalena Borja. And I went through kind of a list of the folks who did things that were at the minimum suspicious, and the name Bora was somewhat prominent, so perhaps I should have just said, well, I'll let that go. Anyhow, that's the Ovita Nauta Award. So the Land Trust Commission has come out and said, Michael Bora didn't do anything wrong, you know. And what we need to do is we need to validate the over 100 leases that the Attorney General has told us are void. And we want the legislature to do that. So As I read that, it's a question of pander. And this close to the election, what group is it best, or what group will you get the maximum political mileage out of by pandering? Now, if you sweep the 100 plus leases that are void, if you sweep those under the rug and say, yeah, they're okay, including some of the really egregious ones that we've talked about more than once, then that's worth maybe 100 votes right there, right? But how about the rest of the folks? How about all of those folks who stood in line for so long and psychologically are still standing in line because they haven't received a Chamorro Land Trust lease, and they watch all of these other people skipping to the head of the line? It's like, you know, when you go to the movies, everybody stands in line for popcorn. And when somebody cuts into the front of the line, just because he or she thinks that standing in line is too burdensome for him or her, the rest of the folks in the line don't like that very much. Most people aren't going to say anything about it, but nobody likes it very much. So that's what we're dealing with. So if you're a skilled politician, to whom will you pander on this question? So I'm going to go through the editorial, and then I'll come back to the pander angle here. Over the weekend, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission issued a statement released through the governor's office. Now, remember, it's the same governor who said that we should stop issuing these leases. I brought that up yesterday. That proclaimed Department of Land Management director and his staff did nothing wrong. Boy, talk. You know, what was Jeff Flake? What was his middle name?
Snow.
Snow. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe we could attach that now to Michael Borja, not because he's flaky like Jeff Snowflake was, but because, according to the governor's office and the commission, he is as pure as the driven snow. He didn't do nothing wrong. Over the weekend, the Land Trust Commission issued a statement released through the governor's office that proclaimed Department of Land Management Director Michael Borja and his staff did nothing wrong. At issue was Borja and certain land managers' decisions to approve leases, including those for certain sought-after Barrigada Heights government lots, one of which is worth $700,000, another one of which is worth $400,000. Yeah, thank you, Real Joe Cruz. You're exactly right. To a select number of people. He didn't have the authority to do so, according to a May 11 Attorney General's office legal opinion. It wasn't the office. Come on, Post. It wasn't the office. The offices don't issue opinions. It was the Attorney General that issued the opinion. You must be using the same grammar book that PNC uses when they refer to the Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, as it. So it was the Attorney General's opinion. The power to approve Chamorro Land Trust leases belongs to the CLT commissioners collectively as part of their duty to safeguard Chamorro Land Trust Act lands. That power cannot be delegated to the director. The AG's legal opinion clearly states. Interestingly, the CLTC not only failed to do what is required by law by carefully scrutinizing and signing off land leases, it also essentially said, yes, it's okay for the director to do what he wasn't supposed to be doing under the law. It's okay. I don't know. Maybe I guess we really won't know how this is all going to sort out until we do the next round of MagPro Awards, which seems to have a real strong curative influence on how we view these things. The CLTC has a different take. We concluded an investigation into these leases along with a review of the entire CLTC program and policies. At the conclusion of the investigation, the commission could find no wrongdoing by the director, staff members, their family members, or those well-connected individuals who have the leases because, well, Real Joe is playing Dave Brubeck's Take 5, so I'll pick this up after a short break.
John Gibson, digging up history. The hard-luck British officer who suffered a mutiny by his men not once but twice, and the first time became a famous movie. That story after this. Let's talk heirloom sheets and towels from Redland Cotton in Alabama. First, the family farm, growing the finest cotton in the world. The spinning, the looming, every step made in America, right down to the cutting and sewing. Sheets designed from a long-lost 1920s weave. The softest, most comfortable, longest-lasting sheets you've ever slept on. The Redland family dedicated to America and linens you'll treasure. Check out redlandcotton.com for America's linen. redlandcotton.com. The governor of a penal colony in Australia was strict and famous for his quick temper. He discovered the officers under his command were not only worthless, they were corrupt. They were running a rum smuggling ring, and the governor took steps to shut down the thriving and profitable business. The officers claimed he was a tyrant, and they decided to rise against him. Their mutiny became known as the Rum Rebellion. The governor saw the mutineers eventually convicted, but he also suffered a deep humiliation. This was the second mutiny against him. The first was aboard a ship he commanded. His name, Captain William Bligh, known to this day for the Mutiny on the Bounty. I'm John Gibson, digging up history.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
If you're a forward-thinking type person and asking yourself, what are the 9 skills I will need for the years to come? Well, then I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we're going to dig in and tell you exactly what those are.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitsky. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So here we are back again, and I notice that Ted Lewis, part of our national radio listening audience, is signed on, and Carl's early for school today. Brad, it's always good to see you here. I suppose you're watching Facebook with one eye and YouTube with the other eye, right? I never... You know,
man, Bob, you're killing me, man.
Sometimes you wonder why the body is constructed the way it is, but now I know why we have 2 eyes, right? And Rico Blancaflor is here. Jose Martinez is with us. Ismael Velez, Lee Stolley, Joe Cruz, Joe Cruz, right? Not the real Joe Cruz. The real Joe Cruz, I'm never quite sure if he's with us or not, but I think most of the time he probably is.
I'm present.
And Albert, who I recognized earlier, and, of course, Juanita Mache, who's extremely punctual and regular. The way the Facebook is set up, the way I'm getting it today, it seems like it's different every day. And on my iPad and on my, looking at my laptop here, I'm not able to see the comments. I can only see about 4 comments, and if I don't get to them right away, they disappear. That's unfortunate because Jose and Real Joe had a nice dialogue going there about abortion and privacy, etc. So we'll get to that entire issue when we get to the card. I've got a pretty interesting card today that I'll just give you a preview on. We start out with Margaret Metcalf versus the Treasury of Guam. And then I don't think there will be anything left, but it's on the card. CLTC versus Saturday Night Live to see which one is the funniest. we're probably going to finish that up on the in this part of the program. And then I've got Curious Ken Paris versus Frank Ogan. And then Tenorio and Leon Guerrero versus Unborn Children. Hills versus Weir. And today's pronouncement from the Supreme Court. I know Real Joe Cruz really wants me to finish up Chamorro versus Chamorro. We may get to that. And bringing up the real is DFS versus Lotte. But going back into the decision to clear the director of land management, because he really didn't do anything wrong. Here's the statement. The commission could find, at the conclusion of the investigation, the commission could find no wrongdoing by the director, staff members, their family members, or those, quote, well-connected individuals who have the leases, because they were following the policies in place at the time. Now, the fact that the policies were illegal, that the policies didn't comply with the law, and that was pretty clear when this matter of switching came up before the commission. You probably saw it on TV, and the question was, what is the authority to allow the switching? And the matter was referred to counsel, who cleared his throat a couple times and said, well, it's an administrative practice. So the fact that it was completely wrong and that there was no authority to do it, the fact that Michael Borer had no authority whatsoever to sign off on those leases, as a matter of David Camacho, even Pica Ferran picked up on that one when it became clear that David Camacho had signed off on some of the leases, a man who has even less claim to that kind of authority than Bora. She said, David, you shouldn't do that. We're going to remove you from the Chamorro. So he was kind of like exiled for anything having to do with the Chamorro Land Trust. Ironic indeed. So, yeah, we saw all these things. Most of the island, or people on the island who have TV sets, saw all of this unfold in front of their eyes. Things that, if they're not criminal, they certainly violate sections of the code dealing with ethics. And now we're told, yeah, but, they followed the procedure that was in place at the time. And yesterday I said, well, what do you say to a director who exercises authority that he doesn't have under the statute of the agency that he is to administer? Do you say that there's nothing wrong there? Let's take it to the other agency that has distinguished itself lately, the Department of Corrections. So let's say that the Director of Corrections releases someone even though he has not completed his sentence. And the reason that he does it is that another director did the same thing. Is that okay? He was following the practice. You would expect the director of any agency to know what the statutory assignment of duties in his agency is. If he doesn't know that, then why do we even need a director? We could probably go down into the ranks of the personnel and find somebody down in the administrative assistant rank or secretarial rank if the person who exercises the authority doesn't have to know what authority he has. But that was Michael Bora. But he didn't do anything wrong. It's all okay. Yeah. The commission issued this statement even when it contradicted the legal opinion of the Attorney General's office. Well, they don't pay any attention to their own lawyer, who is an assistant attorney general, who has advised them what they can and can't do, which they ignore. They ignore. Why shouldn't they be able to ignore the advice of the Attorney General? And then Pica Ferran at a recent meeting, said that actually the commission could validate the 100 or so void leases that the Attorney General says are void. And Pika said that that could be done, and she knows because she's talked to some lawyers, and they told her that it could be done. She didn't tell us who the lawyers were, but you don't need much of an imagination to think, well, if a lawyer says, yeah, you could do it, might not that lawyer be someone who represents or has an interest in a leasehold, one of these leasehold that's void? So why have an assistant attorney general riding side saddle with you at all your meetings and assigned to your agency if you're going to go outside and take advice from, quote, lawyers? But we didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. Nobody else did anything wrong. I wonder if they asked a lawyer to determine whether or not they had done anything wrong. The commissioners required review and approval of any land lease under the Chamorro Land Trust Act's programs, as you were. The commission's required review and approval of any land lease under the Chamorro Land Trust Act programs aren't simply procedural. The commission is required, before approving leases, to hold public meetings which must be announced to the public in advance. Public meetings are meant to shed light on government actions that those in government might want to withhold from the public view. Now, who would do that? Who would do something so that it wouldn't come to the attention of the public? Can you imagine that? Would any government official do something like that? Better question is, would they do it a couple thousand times? Because that's how many of these leases were signed by the director instead of the commission. The AG's legal opinion further advised the CLTC to conform to ethics and government standards. Oh, come on, Elizabeth. You know, conform with ethics and government standards? You're asking for an awful lot here when you're talking about the Department of Land Management, something that you never required before. In reviewing the Barrigada Heights leases in controversy, the Commission should act in a manner that affords the maximum level of public participation, Attorney General Anderson wrote in the legal opinion. Now, that to me means that if you're going to go back to and approve all these void leases, you need to go through the same exercise that you should have done in the beginning before Michael Bora grabbed them and started signing them, started a wholesale signing program. The only way the public found out about Barrigada Heights leases was that a land clearing Bora had authorized resulted in mud flow cascading onto lower residential properties during heavy rains earlier this year. Mud flow, that's pretty appropriate that the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and Michael Bora were exposed by a mud flow. It was improper for the CLTC to investigate this issue, which also calls its integrity into question. Just the mere fact that after all this stuff comes forward and it becomes public, that the CLTC would have the gall to say, yeah, well, there's some problems here. We need an investigation. And let's see, who should we have? Who should do that investigation? Public auditor, attorney general, private investigators. I know. We'll do it ourselves. Wow. Prosecutors in the Attorney General's office should be the ones to determine whether someone didn't do wrong or someone should be charged. Are you listening, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson? Because that's exactly right. So there's some collateral aspects to Zemi Ikotny that I'm going to pick up just for the sake of continuity. And it weighs in kind of on the command of ready, pander. So here's a story from today's PDN. Senators weigh in on land trust's formal request to validate leases. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission on Monday formally asked the legislature to validate its and I get a kick out of this, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission on Monday. Did they have a meeting on Monday? I wonder if they play as fast and loose with the open government law as they do with their substantive statutes. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission on Monday formally asked the legislature to validate its ratification of 2,877 land leases and to authorize and ratify 102 null and void leases. But some senators are already expressing objection to the request. Well, good on you, whoever you are, senators. The legislature has no business adding a political element to the Chamorro Land Trust, Senator Mike San Nicolas said. San Nicolas said he's voting no if the matter should come to a vote. He said the whole purpose of the land trust is to administer Chamorro land subject to the law and free of political favoritism. I think you're very close to being right on target, Michael, except I would take the word political out of there. There's not supposed to be any favoritism at all. Now, Bora and Farron have both used the words compassionate. You know, the rules should allow for us to be a little bit compassionate. I don't want government officials dealing with my money. I don't want them to be compassionate. I want them to follow the law. And if there's going to be any compassion, any exercise of compassion, it should be authorized by the statute, not by folks like the ones we've been talking about here who are very compassionate with somebody else's money and somebody else's place in line. Senator Frank Hogan Jr. said the legislature has a duty to do all it can to find clear answers and workable solutions to the current issues of transparency and accountability with the land trust. And a way to achieve this is by appointing a temporary land administrator. The only way to accomplish this would be to pass Bill 284, and you've heard me rant about that before, and have the governor appoint a temporary land administrator who would have the authority to reform the administrative procedures. And by the way, in other articles, Borough was saying, well, you know, there's this problem and there's that problem, and there are people who are offered land and turn it down, hoping that they'll get something better. Well, you have the ability to promulgate rules and regs pursuant to the administrative adjudication law, Mr. Bora, and you can address all those problems there because the rules for the Chamorro Land Trust Act have never been promulgated. Now, that the smart money over here is saying, yeah, well, what about Public Law 2338? That's got the Paul Berdalio rules and regs in it. And I've explained that before, but I'll just take a minute to go through it again. That 2338 is a statute, and you don't make rules in a statute. When you see the legislature purporting to amend rules and the legislature purporting to amend rules, it's wrong. You can't do that. The legislature can approve rules and regulations expressly or reject them or allow the clock to run and allow them to become effective. Boy, Dave Brubeck already, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back, and I got to wrap this up here before that big halftime show we have every day at 5 o'clock.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
So here we are. I'm going to glance at Facebook again here. Mo Cotton, welcome aboard. Prudencio Mano, understands Supreme Court refused to hear Guam voting rights in national elections. I think that's on the card, Prudencio, and I'm going to cover it, but there's a lot of demagoguery involved there, and I understand what you're saying, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not as though the Supreme Court, all 9 of them, had stood up and said, we're not going to hear Guam and voting rights in national elections, but I'll explain that a little later on. Carol Jenkins talks in terms of the word compassionate, puts an exclamation point behind it. What about the ones that have been waiting since 1995? I was number 615 or 617 on the list, but it's not come up till today, and I have not been called. The CLTC is a bunch of BS. Now, if you're not familiar with the initials BS means, I probably shouldn't go into that on the air, but I think probably our international radio listening audience understands Carol when she says that this is a bunch of BS, and I agree with you 100%, Carol. So if anybody wants to call and chat a little bit about the BS at the CLTC, it's 888-8255. Be looking forward to your calls, and of course we're on Facebook. And while you're on Facebook, how about clicking on that button there that says share? Don't be too selfish, share all of this really good talk radio with your friends and acquaintances and people who perhaps could benefit from the conversation. Daryl Taggarty has a serious question. Am I right to understand that if the legislature acts by passing a bill or resolution to approve a regulations request, then those cannot be changed without the same level of approval? Yeah. Here's how it works, Daryl. An agency, first of all, you have to have an enabling statute that allows an agency to promulgate rules and set standards that the rules must comply with. The agency promulgates the rules, goes through a few hoops, sends them to the legislature, either 60 or 90 days, I forget. If the legislature takes no action, the rules become effective. During that time, the legislature can pass a statute saying, we approve, or they can pass a statute that says, we reject. But if they pass a statute that says, we're going to amend these regulations like this, all of the things that they do by way of amendment are no longer rules, they're statutory. Just like the Paul Berdallo rules in 2338, which no one can find because they're not in the compiler's list of Guam rules, and because of the way the bill is formatted, you can't find them with a regular search feature. So the only way you could ever find the Paul Berdallo so-called rules is by an exercise of oral tradition. A little off the subject, but it's something that really needs to be done at the Land Trust Commission. Real rules need to be promulgated, and the proper procedures need to be gone through to curb the abuses that we see here. So Frank Uggan says the only way to accomplish this would be to pass Bill 284 and have the governor appoint a temporary land administrator who would have the authority to reform the administrative procedures and restore public trust and confidence in the CLTC program. At 284, the governor would appoint a retired judge as a temporary administrator, and that temporary administrator, one of his tasks would be to promulgate rules that had things like ethical and nepotism provisions in them that could prevent Michael Bora from doing what has happened up to this point. Going on with the editorial, Senator Will Castro said, until he's fully aware of all the facts, He does not want to have a position on the matter one way or the other. Way to equivocate there, Will. I mean, you don't know what's going on at all. There's no possible way that you could have any acquaintance with what the Chamorro Land Trust is doing. And by doing that, then you can wait and see exactly which way the wind is blowing, and then you can couch your pandering in such a manner as to appeal to the largest number. Yeah, it's good political thinking, Will. He said he's looking forward to a meeting of the Committee on Environmental, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform. That's Tom Atta's committee. Senator Tom Atta, committee chairman, could not be immediately reached for comment on what his committee intends to do with the Land Trust request. Acting Speaker Therese Terlahi said she's yet to review the commission letter. Yeah, you're looking for the Will Castro Award there, Therese. Land Trust Administrative Director Michael Bora sent copies of the Land Trust adopted resolutions and listing of leases to the legislature on Monday. The commission had determined it's outside of its authority to legally ratify the 102 leases in which applicants, I guess they're ignoring the lawyers that Pika talked to, huh? It's outside its authority to legally ratify the 102 leases which applicants were improperly allowed to switch places in line. The Attorney General categorized as null and void these 102 leases for lacking specific authorization. The Land Trust is also asking the legislature to validate 2,877 leases categorized as voidable but subsequently ratified by the Board of Commissioners. Now, how does the legislature validate? I know that the legislature passes bills, and if that's what you wanted the legislature to do, then that's what you should have done, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, but you didn't. You went ahead, and instead of doing what you should have did, you, in a blanket motion, you validated 2,877 voidable leases. Bora said in his October 8 letter that the Land Trust Board of Commissioners, and I don't know that there is a Board of Commissioners, and staff are currently reviewing laws and rules to recommend legislative changes. We're back to Saturday Night Live again here, aren't we? You'd need a battery of joke writers to come up with material like this if you weren't at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. The staff, the commissioners and staff are currently reviewing laws and rules to recommend legislative changes to improve and make practical the processes of issuing residential and agricultural leases moving forward. Practical. How about legal? The commission will soon submit a separate resolution with a recommended change to the laws. So here's how it works. Apparently, you completely ignore the statute that creates your agency, and you do things that you're not supposed to do. And I explained yesterday the matter with Margarita Bora, who's the land administrator. People who work there know exactly how the records work, how to look up a piece of property, how to find out what's available and what's not available, can gaze at the list and see who's on what place on the list, etc. And when you see a juicy piece of property, you could use your influence to guide the right person to that piece of property, which is exactly what Margarita did with her daughter. Because Margarita's sister was in the States, and whether or not she was going to come back was kind of an open question. So Margarita took it upon herself to have her daughter take the place in line. Her daughter, who signed up in 2016, take over for the sister in the States, and she got one of those Barragata Heights lots. Really nice, but it's okay. No wrongdoing there. Okay, well, it's time for our big halftime break, and I hope that I can finish this up after our big halftime show, the marching bands, the cannon fire, etc. And then we'll go on with the rest of the card.
listening to KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
It's now a Category 4 storm. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The National Hurricane Center within the hour reporting that Hurricane Michael, bearing down on Florida's Gulf Coast, has reached Category 4 strength.
This is a very dangerous, life-threatening hurricane, and all preparations against a landfalling major hurricane in the hurricane warning area should be rushed to completion, including evacuation and whatever other precautions are necessary at this time.
That's Senior Hurricane Specialist Jack Bevan at the National Hurricane Center, who says in addition to the 130-mile-an-hour winds, Michael will trigger a storm surge that could reach 13 feet. A landfall near Panama City, Florida, expected around lunchtime. There's never been a Category 4 storm impact the Florida Panhandle since records have been kept dating back to 1851. Several parts of the Florida Gulf Coast under evacuation orders. Fox's Phil Keating is in Apalachicola.
Gasoline stations around the Panhandle and the Big Bend area, they had long lines all day. Oftentimes they ran out of gas, and also you had traffic evacuating all day yesterday. Most people in this town, Apalachicola, the southern point of the Big Bend, they're gone.
Florida's Governor Rick Scott reminding residents who choose to stay that first responders may not be able to reach them if they need help. President Trump ordering the Environmental Protection Agency to loosen its rules that block the sale of gasoline containing 15% ethanol during the summertime, telling a campaign rally in Corn-Rich, Iowa last night.
Today, we are unleashing the power of E15 to fuel our country all year long.
The president also urging Iowans to vote in the midterms, warning the Democrats would reverse his ethanol decision. Asian stocks closing Wednesday mostly higher. Dow futures are now also back in positive territory. The day after the Dow lost 56 points and the Nasdaq gained 2. This is Fox News.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Taste the sizzle at Chili's with our new fajita flavors. Our signature fajitas are served with sliced bell peppers, caramelized onions, topped with chipotle garlic butter, and chopped cilantro. Build your fajita with over 16 ounces of tender grilled chicken, juicy steak, and a dozen pieces of seasoned grilled shrimp in the family fajita trio. All served with warm flour tortillas and fresh toppings like mixed cheese, guacamole, salsa, and pico de gallo. Experience bold, sizzling fajita flavors only at Chili's. More life happens here.
Bipartisan praise on Capitol Hill for U.S. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, but lingering questions about her unexpected resignation.
Democrats are praising Ambassador Nikki Haley's service at the United Nations, but are saying her departure is another sign of the Trump administration's chaotic foreign policy and expressing concern about the leadership vacuum she leaves. Florida Republican Congressman Ted Yoho serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and says Haley cleaned up after the Obama administration.
Nikki Haley's done a phenomenal job bringing grit back to what America stands for.
Since Haley is from South Carolina, there was instant speculation about her potentially replacing Senator Lindsey Graham if he's named to a Trump cabinet post. But Senator Graham told WHNS Fox Carolina he doesn't plan on leaving the Senate.
I love my job. I love representing the people of our state. I have zero interest in serving President Trump's cabinet.
On Capitol Hill, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also praising Ambassador Haley. The secretary just returned from North Korea, where he says talks with Kim Jong-un made more progress toward denuclearization. South Korea's foreign minister says Seoul is now considering lifting some of its unilateral sanctions against Pyongyang to create more momentum for diplomacy and improve relations to defuse the nuclear crisis. A former aide to congressional Democrats charged with doxing, staying behind bars for now.
Jackson Costco will stay in custody
Friday, a federal judge rejected pretrial release for the former congressional staffer. Costco was arrested last week and charged with illegally accessing personal information of Republican senators, then posting that information to Wikipedia during the contentious confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Costco is also charged with threatening a witness. Costco had done work for House and Senate Democrats. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
In New York, I'm Jack Callahan, and this is Fox News.
Hyundai Construction Equipment is sold exclusively on Guam by Morico Equipment, a market leader with proven reliability in large excavators, loaders, and forklifts. Morico Equipment, with 28 years on Guam, offers Hyundai Construction Equipment sales, rental, parts, service, and fully maintained lease finance. Hyundai Equipment is in stock on Guam. Equipment demonstrations are available on request. Contact Morico Equipment on Ipoh Road at 649-1946 or go to moricoequipment.com.
Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
Are high power bills sending your budget into chaos? Take control with the help of Micronesia Renewable Energy. Using the highest quality panels, a solar energy system from MRE will guarantee to save you money on power. With MRE, Christmas comes early. With every solar energy system, homeowners not only get $400 for signing up, but also an entry for a chance to win $1,000 in cold, hard cash, just in time for Christmas. It pays to be an MRE customer. Conditions apply. Call 632-2613 for details. MRE, the smarter choice.
The Bob Klitsky Show is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Get a 20-ounce stainless steel Circle K Coffee Club tumbler. Just stop into any Circle K, sign up for our Power Pass rewards program, and after your purchase of 15 cups of premium coffee, any size, you get your tumbler for free. While supplies last, conditions apply. See store for details. Get a 20-ounce stainless steel Circle K Coffee Club tumbler. Just swipe your Power Pass key fob when you purchase Circle K premium coffee, any size, and after 15 cups, you'll get your tumbler for free. While supplies last, conditions apply. See store for details.
It's a great halftime show. So here we are back again. I've just got a couple of more comments here on the Chamorro Land Trust cluster fumble. Two of the real key players here are Frank Uggan and Tom Atta. Frank Uggan is the guy who really discovered it back in April when someone brought to him the Mud River, brought his attention the Mud River, and Frank investigated and found out what was going on. And after he found out what was going on in April, he confronted Tom Atta in May and said, you know, I would hope that you would have an oversight hearing on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And Tom's response was, why? And Frank says, it's urgent. And Tom's response back to Frank, now this was all in the paper, and I read it yesterday. Tom's response back to Frank, why? Because it's an election year? Now, this is the same Tom Atta that wasn't available to comment on the news story that appeared in the Post, in the PDN today. Senators weigh in on land trust formal request. Tom Atta, committee chairman, couldn't immediately be reached for comment, etc. So if Frank Uggan's Bill 285 had been passed back in May, this whole thing could have been sorted out. And it would have been, it couldn't have been, no matter what, it would have been far better than letting the Chamorro Land Trust Commission do this onanistic investigation of itself. So Frank Uggan's bill came on. I've kvetched about this before. Just bear with me one more time. It was supposed to be heard on the 13th of July, even though it was introduced in May, and it should have been enacted in May. Tom Atta just summarily canceled that hearing and never put it back on. And my theory, my speculation is this, that Frank Uggan was running for governor. Tom Atta was the co-chairman of Lou Leon Guerrero's campaign. Running for governor is a zero-sum game. What would tend to benefit Frank Uggan by putting him in a favorable light as to one who's attempting to root out cronyism, if not corruption, would not be favorable for Lou. So Tom just sat on it. I have the testimony that I was prepared to give until Tom summarily shut down that hearing, and I'm going to just read a little bit of it because I never got a chance to present it to the legislature. This crucial remedial legislation should have been passed in May. On April 19, Mount Barragata residents reported drainage concerns caused by a newly bulldozed road leading from Route 16 into the boonies. The road led not only into the boonies, but ran smack dab into a Pandora's box of untrustworthiness, incompetence, legal, ethical, and moral problems involving, among others, DLM Director and Deputy Director Michael Bora and David Camacho, Chamorro Land Trust Commission Chair Pika Fayaran, Senator Regine Lee, employees of the CLTC, one of whom confessed on camera to a violation of 4 GCA 15204, which reads, fair treatment. No employee shall use or attempt to use an official position to secure or grant unwarranted privileges, etc., for himself, herself, a spouse, children, or others, and so on. So that was the beginning of the testimony, and later on in the testimony, this is what I would have said. Only the most naive amongst us would proceed on the basis that the same people who created, abated, benefited from, or ignored the scandal can be trusted to bring it to an end. And, you know, I know sometimes I don't get it right, but was I right on this one? Was I exactly on point? And apparently the Land Trust Commission thinks that we are extremely naive because we're going to swallow this. We did an investigation, and Mike Bora didn't do anything wrong. I guess if I were to examine the letter that they sent down to Tom Atta, the thing that I would be most curious about would be if the letter started out with what was the introduction to the facts in the letter? Maybe, and it came to pass? Or how about once upon a time? Because if there were ever a fairy tale, the fairy tale is that that the Land Trust employees, Commission, and Michael Bora didn't do anything wrong. Juanita questions, my brain is working overtime, CLTC, no oversight hearing. No, Tom didn't see the urgency of it when Frank brought it up. And I hope, Juanita, I speculated as to why Tom just doesn't seem to want to deal with this at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he would be the one to champion a bill just to let it all go and not find out who the wrongdoers are, what they did, who benefited from it, and how to prevent such things from happening again. That's the only way to deal with this unless we want the CLTC and the Department of Corrections to be the model agencies by which we want the rest of the government to establish its affairs. So I guess that's enough for Jemmy Cotney today. What did I do with the editorial here? I hope I didn't lose it. Yeah, I still have it. I got to give the Post credit. The Post and KUAM have been the ones who have done a real workmanlike job on this stuff. They're the ones that are really digging in and exposing all of this stuff. The Daily News, not so much. But for the Post today, I'm going to give them probably the biggest star that I've ever given to any editorial, because they were right on the money with this one, and I hope that they don't let it go. I hope that they stay with it, unless we all want to be branded as so naive as to swallow this fairy tale that Mike Bora and the Chamorro Land Trust Commission have recently come out with, that, oh, we didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so we move on from there to Metcalf versus the Treasury. This is a pretty short one. Our Washington representative, Margaret Metcalf, apparently is playing hooky because the office is closed and she can't be reached by telephone. And she has testified before a governmental board in San Jose, and she has indicated that she is a resident of San Jose. This is a story that ran on PNC last night. Metcalf is not listed as the director for the Washington office. She is listed in the current Antelope staffing pattern as a special assistant, costing taxpayers $102,530 with benefits. The day after the National Governors Association published contacts of her apparently defunct D.C. office, Metcalf was seen testifying at the San Jose City Council. So maybe there's a mistake here. Maybe rather than being our person who's kind of our rep in D.C., she's our rep in San Jose, so she can establish liaison with the San Jose City Council. Metcalf was seen testifying at the San Jose City Council. She opposed a proposed development out of concerns that her ability to do business, generate income, and ultimately her livelihood would be threatened. She didn't say anything about kids falling over the cliff, though. Yeah. Metcalf was later interviewed by a Bay Area newspaper, the Mercury News, where it was further reiterated that she lives in the Bay Area. What exactly is the responsibility of the governor's D.C. director? PNC reached out to the governor's former Washington director, J. Rick Paris. Now, who do you suppose J. Rick Paris is? Have you ever heard of him? Who told us exactly why having a physical presence in the nation's capital is vital. Late this afternoon, Governor's Communications Director Oya Nyareko confirmed for PNC that Metcalf is still serving as the governor's director for the D.C. office. Apparently, she has one of the longest commutes in the country if she lives in San Jose and is working out of the defunct D.C. office. If she has to drive from San Jose to D.C. every day, if that's her commute, that must be somewhat arduous. Just taking a little kind of a cynical look at this. So we're at a time when we're claiming that money is really tight. We're paying somebody $102,000 to testify before the San Jose City Council. That's kind of the way I would read this. Maybe not the best use of our money. Going on, the next item on the card here is Curious Kin versus Frank. Curious Kin would be a gentleman named Joaquin Paris. He goes by the name of Ken Paris. And this is a story that ran, a news story that ran in the Post on 10 October. Ken had a good earned media day yesterday, or as you were today, because he's got a news story and a letter to the editor. But here's the news story. Democratic Party representative on the Election Commission intends to raise questions about what appears to him to be ongoing campaign activity by the Uggan-Limtiaco team. Ken Paris, for Tall Tales purpose, that would be Curious Ken, told the Daily Post it's his understanding that the Uggan-Limtiaco team will be holding a rally in Agana this weekend to officially announce they're back in the running as write-in candidates. Over the past 2 days, this is from the article, Uggan and Limtiaco have been spotted along various roadways waving to passing motorists, and last week they posted a video on their Facebook page suggesting they're about to jump back into the race. And the attribution at the end of the message is, I'm Frank Uggan Jr., and I approve this message. Paris believes that that statement alone is evidence enough. This guy Ken Paris, you know, he's a regular beaver when it comes to ferret. I should say ferret. He's a regular ferret when it comes to ferreting out evidence. I've seen that with how he dealt with other matters brought before the Election Commission. He just digs in and really finds the evidence. And then another quote, they're spending money, Paris said about the recent activities of the Uggan-Limtiaco team. This is what I'm interested in. He said, number one, where are they getting this money? Who are the contributors, and how much have they already spent? When asked if he thought that there was any violation of election law, Paris said that he plans to raise the question with the Election Commission's legal counsel at the GEC's next meeting Thursday afternoon. And then the rest is, a little bit of prognostication as to what's going to happen. So the reason I'm labeling this as Curious Ken, we've been told that the Election Commission doesn't investigate things unless there's a written complaint from a citizen, and then they'll investigate things. And I keep going back to the real sore point here. Troy Torres made a complaint about some Chapter 8 violations that involved J. Dean Tuncap, David Cruz's contract, and those things. And he clearly laid out a prima facie case of violation of some of the campaign laws. No, I'm not saying that what he alleged were actually violations, but I'm saying the allegations that he made should have been dealt with by the Election Commission in open session, and they should have made a ruling on it. They didn't do that. What they did was they came up with a decision on Chapter 8 matters that said, under Chapter 17, all of this is confidential, and we don't have jurisdiction, and we're not going to share with you our findings as to why we don't have jurisdiction. Maybe they can help, Frank, they can help Tom Atta sweep this land trust stuff under the rug, because that was a clear case of sweeping something under the rug, deciding a Chapter 8 complaint based on Chapter 17. Chapter 17 is finance violations. Chapter 8 is campaign violations. So where was Curious Ken at the time that complaint came into the commission? And then I've explained in my own situation where I had 2 complaints that I brought before the Election Commission concerning David Cruz's contract, John Fernandez, and the Attorney General, where David Cruz said that he was given an ultimatum that either he killed his campaign, that is, that he got out of his campaign for lieutenant governor, or he would be fired. And Curious Ken and the other commissioners said, well, that was not an ultimatum. They just they gave him a choice. There were two parts to that complaint. The other part was that according to the allegations from the Rodriguez-Cruz campaign, which were pretty well published, the Attorney General and the Director of Education knew why David Cruz wanted that contract, so that he could continue to work and run for lieutenant governor. And I pointed out what I suggested was a violation of our campaign laws. Curious Ken apparently decided that one sotto voce, because when the written decision came out, it didn't mention that matter at all. Anyhow, it seems that Ken's curiosity has a kind of a personal dimension to it, and now that it's Frank Uggan, he has become very curious, and he wants to get to the bottom of this. He wants to ask counsel if Frank really is a candidate, and if he is, so what? So what? If he is, there are some reports that he's supposed to file, and if he does, it's kind of a nothing burger. Ken writes a long letter to the editor kvetching about Frank Uggan and Frank's running as a write-in campaign, even though the primary is over. Okay, I understand that. And speaking, this is probably the longest decision of the Election Commission that I've seen. The only thing is, and Ken goes through it and explains why the commission did what it did and what it didn't do, what it didn't do, unlike the official documents of the commission, which are signed by Maria Pangilinan, and are always quite sketchy. So I guess Ken Paris, when it comes to earned media, rung the bell today. The only other thing I have to say about Curious Ken and the write-in campaign or the non-write-in campaign or whatever it is that Frank Uggan is doing, there is a poll that the Post is running. And in this poll, the percentages look like this. Leon Guerrero got 28% of the vote, Tenorio got 22%, and write-in got 50% of the poll. So this poll suggests that the write-in, and I guess that would be Frank Uggan, is the strongest of the three units vying for governor of Guam. Very interesting. Now, how valid is this poll? That would be the next question. And it's as valid as people's coffee buying habits at 76 gas stations. Because as I understand it, when you go into 76 gas station for coffee, you can get a cup with a sleeve with your favorite candidate on it, and that's how the tabulations are made. So enough of Curious Ken and the write-in candidates. We're going to come back to Tenorio and Leon Guerrero versus unborn children right after the break.
Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959. Now you can start planning for the holidays by getting a personal Christmas loan from $1,000 up to $3,500. Family Finance has 3 convenient locations to serve you. Give them a call in Dededo, 633-4473, Hagåtña, 475-4545, and the Upper Tumon location on the 2nd floor of the Pacific Building at 647-5626. Get your Christmas loans today from Family Finance.
right there at center field, Wrigley Field. I got one comment here that deals with the land trust, and then I'll get to you, Kella. So hang on for just a second. Elwin Champaco chimes in and says, Tom Atta has left his legacy as a lawmaker as a trailing stench of potaki by strategically ignoring the severity of the land trust issues. He will bring the same stench to the I'm in administration should they win. Why don't you come out and tell us what you really think, Elwin? You're kind of beating around the bush on that one. So Elwin's working on another post, but in the meantime, Kellis, how you doing?
How do, Senator? Real fast, what I was thinking of the coffee sleeves. The thing that gets me is I don't think that you have to write in on the write-in one, like Frank Ogden and the whole names. I mean, if they just grab one that says write in, because I think most people are lazy, and given the choice of selecting, something or writing it in, and they have to put the first name, they have to put the full names in, both full names evidently, for the write-in to work. Is that not correct?
Well, as I understand it, the general law of dealing with ballots is that if you can determine the intent of the voter, you count the vote.
But, for example, if I wrote down Frank, Frank who?
Yeah, that probably wouldn't work. It'd probably have to be at least,
right.
Yeah. And then...
So what I was just saying is, even though, yes, I agree that 50% of the people might do that, but it's one thing when you're getting your coffee in the morning, but when you're voting, and most people, I mean, the majority of the voters on Guam are lazy because they don't vote. And so the ones that do go vote, I don't know how many, I don't see a vast majority of them writing all that in. Unless they're giving them stickers, I don't know if they'd let them use stickers. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I remember when Paul Calvo ran a write-in candidacy back in the 70s, he actually furnished rubber stamps to people to take into the polls with them. Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to be doing something like that, but like I said, the 50% of the people getting the other or the write-in, I don't think that before they got their coffee, they had to write in all the names on it before they purchased their coffee.
Yeah, good point, Gillis. And
because I couldn't be putting you in or Ray. You and Ray for governor.
That would be a good choice, wouldn't it?
Okay, I gotta go.
Thanks for calling, Gillis. It's insightful, the fact that if you want to write somebody in, you actually have to take the pen in your hand and print or write that person's name in the block and then mark the oval in order for that vote to count. And for a lot of people, it's just easier to, heck with it, I'm just going to mark the oval. With respect to the 76 poll, I sarcastically gave it more dignity probably than it deserves. It's clearly not scientific. It's for amusement only. But I think Kellis makes a good point. When you buy coffee, you don't have to fill out any papers. You just grab the sleeve that you want, and I suspect that some people are grabbing that write-in sleeve just to make things a little bit more interesting. But we'll see how things play out here, Kellis. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us on that. And we go from there to Ray and Lou versus, how did I phrase that? Ray and Lou versus unborn children. And last Sunday there was a, let's see here. There was a demonstration in front of 7 of the churches where hundreds of people came out for a pro-life wave and rally. And then also at about the same time, the Women's Forum discussed approaches to women's rights. And I'm going to read from that women's rights, which is a separate category from just the rights of individuals, apparently, for that group. And here is 2 paragraphs addressing abortion. The protection of reproductive rights is a topic that many women are concerned about nationally. Candidates were asked what they would do to ensure women on Guam have legal access to safe abortions. And there's an answer here from Democrat Jermaine Alerta. Every woman should have the right to safe abortions, okay? But ultimately, I think we should be looking at how we can reduce the need for them in the first place. Jermaine Alerta. He is the only candidate whose name was identified with the issue at all. Although there were several people there, I guess we aren't going to find out who stood where on that. But I saw those 2 stories, and I said, you know, that's really a major issue, the issue of abortion. And, of course, I pointed out that I referred to it as the A word because it's so much more popular nowadays to talk about pro-choice and pro-life, when really what you're talking about is aborting an unborn child. Pro-choice means that a woman, it would be unconstitutional to have any laws that prohibit a woman from aborting her unborn child. Pro-life goes the opposite direction. Historical background: before Roe versus Wade, that question was a matter of state law, which is where it really belongs. I think even Ruth Bader Ginsburg would agree with me on that. But the Supreme Court came along and found that right of privacy that I'm always complaining about, found that right of privacy in the Constitution and said it violates a woman's right of privacy to for states to regulate abortion. So that's gone. If Roe versus Wade were reversed, then we'd go back to the old system where it would be a matter of state law whether or not a woman could have an abortion. And some of the states would say yes, some of the states would say no. That's supposed to be the beauty of our federal system. But I was curious, Bob, when this came up as to why this has not been, the abortion question has not been an issue that gets discussed more in this campaign, because it is an important issue. And if you look at national politics, it's at the forefront in almost every discussion, especially between Democrats and Republicans. So Lou is a Democrat, and she's, I don't think it's any secret that Lou is pro-abortion. Ray is a Republican, and I said, I don't know what Ray's stance is on the matter of abortion. Well, as luck would have it, about the same time I was saying that, Ray was interviewed after one of his visits to the pretrial services office, and he said it was part of his job to protect the unborn. So we've got Ray, who is anti-abortion, and Lou, who is pro-abortion. And one would think that that would be more prominent in the discussions that we've been having here. Ray tipped us off to something this morning. Ray mentioned public law, as you were, Bill 195-32, the title of which is relative to protecting infants who are born alive as the result of an abortion through the establishment of the Infant Child's Right to Life Act. And Ray said he was aware of it and he'd seen something about it, but he wanted to do a little bit more homework on it before he discussed it on his show. So I'm going to discuss it, but that should not discourage you from tuning into Ray tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, because regardless of what I say, you wouldn't want to miss Ray's take on the same subject. It may be different. It may be the same. It's probably going to be better. But since I've been talking about this, I want to take a look at Bill 19532, which passed and is now Public Law 32-90, and it's about a 9-page bill. I just want to read the legislative findings and intent. Legislature finds that a proposal was previously introduced in a prior legislature that would protect the life of a child who is brought into this world through the abortion process and upon extraction from the mother's womb is found to be still alive. The legislature recognizes that a child in this situation who is found to be alive must be preserved, and every effort must be made to protect the child's life. Therefore, it is the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that would require that in such cases whereupon an infant that through an abortion process is found to still be alive, that life must be recognized as a human being and thus must be extended the right to life. So what this bill does is it deals with botched abortions, where an abortion was attempted and through somebody's screw up, the child is actually emerges from the mother and is alive. And this statute says you can't then starve that child or take any means to end that child's life. And it's a pretty stringent statute. There are criminal penalties. It's a no-nonsense type statute. And that's what it's about. And I did find a video of Lou Leon Guerrero's testimony testifying against that bill. Now, just as she did with the matter of the location of the Regalo house in her neighborhood, she didn't come right out and address it head on. She had some, I don't know if they were pretextual reasons or not. They sounded pretextual to me. And she said, well, you know, there's a federal law on this particular subject. But more importantly, I don't think the legislature should get involved in doctors' businesses and make these judgments for women and doctors, etc. So she probably could explain her testimony against Bill 195-32 much better than I could, but I hope that she does. I hope she takes that opportunity because for me, this is an extremely important issue. Who's pro-abortion and who's anti-abortion? And I don't think that I'm alone on that particular subject. So that's that item on the card. Tenorio and Leon Guerrero versus unborn children. So let me take a look at some of my Facebook comments here. Here's Elwin again. People of Guam, should you vote for a gubernatorial candidate who chooses to end the lives of unborn children, then you may not be true Catholics or even children of God. Think hard about that as you head to the polls. Jose Martinez. In 1990, Governor Ada signed into law a ban on abortions on Guam, which passed unanimously in the Guam legislature. Lou Leon Guerrero was at the forefront in supporting the U.S. in usurping the will of the people of Guam to overturn the law. So there's even a, in addition to the straightforward issue here, there's even kind of a colonialist issue here, right, Jose? And Lou sided with the colonizer. And Elwin Champaco, again, there is no greater sin than to take an innocent life or supporting actions to do so. Powerful comments, and I hope that somewhere along this, during this campaign, that Ray and Lou speak out on what I think you'll all agree with me, is an extremely important issue. So that's Tenorio Leon Guerrero versus unborn children. And now I'm going to get to the part that Prudencio was interested in. And I have a page from Neil Weir's website and some supporting materials here. And the headline is, Supreme Court denies review. Feds defend disenfranchisement in U.S. territories before Human Rights Commission. And I don't like Weir's approach to this stuff, because I think most often if it's not demagoguery, it borders on demagoguery. And I've said this before, there are a lot of really complicated issues, political issues that we need to deal with here. Issues of hegemony, race, culture, politics, political status, relationship with the United States, etc. And I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors by trying to inflame as opposed to educate as to what's going on here. So a good example is the word disenfranchisement. When you put dis in front of something, it means something was removed. So if we are disenfranchised here, that means that we had some right that was somehow taken away from us. Sad to say that the political rights that Guam has had have not been altered in a negative sense. We started out with a limited set of political rights, and we still have those. Now, I've pointed out, and many times, that in the American federal system we have 50 states, and we have a central government that used to be called the federal government. I don't use that term anymore. I call it the national government now. But a person's political rights are a function of state law, not a function of national law. So, wow, I only got 10 more minutes to finish this up, but I will after the break.
At the heart of everything we do is our mission to improve the life of every child. From mungy nennies to growing teens, they'll be in trusted hands at FHP Health Center, where we offer comprehensive pediatric services to nurture and protect your child's health from day one. Begin your little one's journey to good health at FHP with seasoned pediatricians and professional staff who hold decades of combined experience. FHP Health Center, our island, your clinic.
So Weir goes on to say, today the same court, as you were, last week nearly 4 million disenfranchised Americans living in the territories could only watch from the sidelines as a new Supreme Court justice was confirmed. Today, the same court denied review of our lawsuit seeking expanding voting rights in the U.S. territories. Darn that Supreme Court. Now, I've explained on more than one occasion that the way a case gets to the U.S. Supreme Court from one of the circuit courts of appeals is by the filing of a paper called a writ of certiorari. Ordinarily, in a given year, 8,000 writs of certiorari are filed with the Supreme Court, and about 80 of those are granted. So the orders that came out of the Supreme Court yesterday, there were over 8 pages of denials of petitions for writ of certiorari. And Weir's case, Segovia, happened to be one of them. So this is not some earth-shaking event where the Supreme Court sat down and listen to lawyers arguing, etc. It's a very routine matter, and except for Neil Gorsuch, the whole certiorari sorting out process is done by law clerks. So the way Neil phrases it, it's kind of like, ah, darn, we got screwed again, you know. Then he goes on to say, this timing paints in stark relief the undemocratic nature of justice for Americans in the territory. 98% of whom are racial or ethnic minorities. Now that really adds a lot to the argument, doesn't it? That 98% of the people in the territories are ethnic or racial minorities. And of course, in the world of the left, the idea is the game of victims and villains, and you have to cast yourself as a villain, as a victim. Find some identity group that you can purport to belong to, and then you are entitled to more. But of course, if there are victims, there have to be villains, and here the villain is the U.S. Supreme Court and our entire system of government. Weir goes on to say, absent of full enjoyment of the right to vote, Americans in the territories are too easily ignored by all three branches of the federal government. That's why if we are to bring an end to this second-class citizenship, I would rather hear someone scratch his fingernails on the blackboard and come up with this BS argument that people living in Guam are second-class citizens. And I've laid it out for you before that there are classes of citizens here, and I'm a second-class citizen myself, but I don't mind. The first-class citizens here on Guam are people who were born here, because when they die, they are entitled to a federal estate tax break if they have a large estate. The U.S. government won't attempt to tax the assets in their estate located anywhere outside the 50 states, but they'll get mine. So that's one of the classifications. Another one is that when it comes time to vote in our, what everybody but Paul Zerzan goes along with the plebiscite, I can't register to vote in the plebiscite because although I'm a United States citizen and can vote in every other election, I can't vote in that plebiscite. So if you're looking for second-class citizens, turn on your radio at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and tune to 93.3, because here I am. So I'm probably going to have to finish this on Monday because my friend R. Carl is here probably helping me close out the program, right, R. Carl?
Yes, I'm here, Bob, with the last few minutes. Yeah, I've had a discussion with my friend, one of my friends online at Facebook, and I brought up about, the presidential election, not looking at it as one big election, but as 50 small ones, plus Washington, D.C., and each of those having electoral college electors at stake. And for some reason, it's like he just doesn't seem to be hearing what I'm saying. The irony is, if I or any other citizen on Guam relocated to the United States and registered to vote, met all the voting requirements there, we would have exactly the same voting rights as over, 300 million citizens there are, however many citizens there are.
You're right.
And, does that mean that we're second-class citizens here, and then by moving we become first-class citizens? And also, people that move from the States and come here can't vote for president unless they request absentee ballot, I guess.
Well, not if...
Does that mean that they were first-class citizens there, and then by coming here they became second-class citizens?
Well,
so it
you see, Carl, the nonsensical part of this second-class citizen business is that the reason that people living here aren't able to vote has nothing to do with their citizenship. It has to do with their location. But it's a lot easier to use words like second-class citizens if you're out raising funds for your organization to finance all of this pointless litigation. I'll get into that tomorrow when I come back to this topic. It's a classic case of demagoguery where you're appealing to someone's emotions as opposed to his reasons. Oh, you know, we're just second-class citizens out here in Guam because we can't vote for president. But it's exactly as you say. There's no defect in our particular citizenship other than the ones that I mentioned, just for contrast, and that anyone who is a U.S. citizen who actually lives here is not going to be able to vote in national elections. Anyone who does live here and moves to any one of the 50 states can. If he moves to the District of Columbia, he's not going to be voting for a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. That's the design of the country.
Yeah, and I told my friend, you know, that even if they magically gave us the right to vote tomorrow and we voted in this next election, it wouldn't mean anything because we don't have any electoral college electors at stake. And the electoral college electors are the ones that actually elect the president. And there are reasons for the electoral college. It forces candidates to spread out and campaign across the United States, you know, in flyover country, as opposed to focusing their campaigns in the coastal and border population centers, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, Miami, you know, etc. So there are very good and brilliant reasons why we have an electoral college. But anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to slip that in. I just wanted to add in that thought before your show ended. It's been a very good show. I've been listening all the time in the background, and very good. Tuck another one under your belt.
Okay, Carl. Well, it's always gratifying to know that you're here to help me kind of close up the show. So we'll be looking for you tomorrow, okay?
Yes. I'm even if I don't say much, I'm doing other things and I'm listening in the background, kind of like a sponge, just kind of soaking up stuff. And I always learn stuff. You got very good, bright listeners. I learn from the online comments. I learn from your comments. It's really very educational. So I always try and tune in.
Okay, Carl. Well, we'll see you tomorrow. Let me just see. I'm hearing my favorite song here. Just let me close out here by reading some of the Facebook comments. Jose Martinez says, her testimony, meaning Lou, including words saying that sick or disabled persons would be financial burdens to the family and society. I could only conclude she was testifying, and I lost the post. Then Albert says, I'm a second-class citizen too, Bob, and a proud Marine veteran. It don't get much better than that. Well, I agree. Juanita's here to close out the program. Daryl Taggarty says, we can now vote for the U.S. president. Just no one listens. That's true. We have our straw poll, don't we, Daryl? And then Daryl says, absolutely, Neil Weir is practicing demagoguery poorly. He doesn't use the language artfully enough. Dave Davis is practicing identity politics by claiming to be a victim of the villain Chamorros. Well, I guess your identity politics is where you find it, Daryl. I guess your filial duties wouldn't allow you to call in today, but maybe you can work in a call tomorrow. But that's it for today. Adios. Hasta lupa.
The Point is KUSG, Hagat Ya Guam, 90.